I remember something that happened to me when I was younger, something I almost never talk about. There was a time when I was so close to achieving something I deeply wanted, and I threw it away because I wanted to impress the wrong people. It's strange how one single moment, one decision made out of pride or fear, can ripple through your whole life. And every time I hear stories like the one I'm about to tell you, I feel that familiar sting in my chest. Maybe that's why this story matters so much to me. Maybe that's why I tell it in the way I do, because somewhere inside, I still hope that someone listening avoids making the same kind of mistake. He grew up in a neighborhood where dreams were usually treated as jokes. Kids joked about becoming doctors or astronauts or movie stars, not because they believed it, but because it was easier to laugh than to hope. But he wasn't like them. He wasn't afraid to dream, and he definitely wasn't afraid to say it out loud. He wanted to play in the NBA. Not just as a fantasy or something to talk about on a schoolyard bench, he wanted it with the kind of fire that turns a kid into a disciple of his own ambition. He practiced outside until his fingers felt like they were filled with sand. Sometimes he dribbled until his palms burned. His mother told him that she could always find him by listening for the rhythm of the basketball hitting the concrete, a rhythm that became the soundtrack of their little corner of the world. Even people who didn't care about basketball could see it. There was something different about him. Something that made coaches raise their eyebrows. Something that made neighbors pause mid-conversation when he jumped, when he drove to the basket, when he landed with that unshakable confidence of someone who already saw himself on a bigger stage. He wasn't just good, he was gifted. A natural. The kind of kid who makes a scout put down his coffee because suddenly he needs both eyes on the court. And with that gift came pressure. Not the type you feel when someone tells you to clean your room or finish your homework, but the kind that wraps around your throat and whispers, if you fail, you'll prove everyone right. He carried that pressure quietly. He never complained. But it lived with him, sat with him at the dinner table, ran laps with him after practice, kept him awake at night when the rest of the world seemed to have found peace. And maybe that's why, when the wrong people showed up at the wrong time, he didn't see the danger. He only saw an escape. A temporary distraction that made him feel less alone. It usually begins like that. Most bad choices don't announce themselves as bad choices. They arrive disguised as comfort, as acceptance, as belonging. And he wanted to belong. Even the strongest ones do. There was a group of older guys who hung around the local courts. They weren't exactly role models, but they had a certain charm, a certain laugh-out-loud energy that made you feel like being around them meant you were someone. When they talked, people listened. When they walked into a room, heads turned. And for a kid who had spent years being the talented one, the quiet one, the one with potential, being seen as something else, something cool, felt intoxicating. I understand him more than I wish I did. Sometimes you don't want to be the golden child everyone expects something from. Sometimes you just want to be normal. He started spending time with them. First just watching games, then hanging out after practice, then staying out later than he should. None of it seemed dangerous at first. They joked, they talked trash, they hyped him up. They made him feel like he belonged in a world that wasn't built around his dream. But little by little, he began skipping extra workouts. He told himself it didn't matter. Missing one day wouldn't ruin anything. He would make it up tomorrow. But that's how trades with the universe work. You don't realize the cost until the bill arrives, and by then it's too late to negotiate. One afternoon, during a local tournament, a college scout happened to be visiting family in the area. He wasn't there to recruit, but someone told him about the kid who jumped like he had springs instead of bones, the kid who played with that old school fire. The scout hesitated, but curiosity won. He walked over to the court, stood by the fence, and watched. And what he saw stunned him. The kid wasn't just good, he was special. Raw. Explosive. Electric. The kind of player who makes you feel like you've just stumbled into a moment that will matter in the future. After the game, the scout approached him. He introduced himself, handed him a card, and said words every young athlete dreams of hearing, "I think you have real potential. I'd like to talk more." The kid froze. His heart raced. His hands trembled. This was it, the first door. The first step toward the life he imagined every night before falling asleep. And for a moment, everything made sense. Everything he had ever done, the late-night dribbles, the early morning practices, the sacrifices, felt like they were finally paying off. But life has a cruel sense of timing. Because on that same afternoon, the same group of older guys invited him out. Nothing special, just, "Come chill with us for a bit." The kid felt torn. He held the scout's card in one hand, and the invitation of the only people who made him feel like he wasn't just the future NBA kid, in the other. The scout told him he would return the next day to talk more. He told him not to be late. He told him opportunities like this didn't come often. And the kid nodded, promising he would be there. But that night, the guys he admired said something that hit him wrong. They teased him for getting excited. They mocked the scout's interest. They said things like, "He's probably lying, you think you're special. Come on, man, don't be soft." Their words weren't meant to destroy him, but for someone already battling insecurities, it was enough. The kid felt himself shrinking. He laughed it off, pretended he didn't care, pretended the scout didn't matter. And when one of them said, "Just hang with us tomorrow, we got plans," he agreed. The next day came. The scout waited at the court. 10 minutes. 20. 40. Eventually, he left. The world doesn't pause for someone who hesitates. That's something we all learn eventually, some sooner, some too late. Meanwhile, the kid was miles away, trying to silence the guilt growing inside him. Deep down, he knew what he had just thrown away, even if he didn't want to admit it. And the worst part? The guys he had chosen over his dream wouldn't even remember that day a week later. But he would remember it for the rest of his life. When he returned home that evening, his mother asked how the meeting with the scout went. He lied. He said it wasn't a big deal. He said the scout wasn't seriously interested. And even though she tried to hide it, she looked disappointed, not in him, but because she felt something slipping away, something she couldn't name. Mothers often sense the cracks long before they turn into fractures. In the weeks that followed, his behavior changed. He practiced less. He hung out more. He stopped pushing himself, telling himself he would start again tomorrow. Always tomorrow. Tomorrow is a beautiful lie. A comforting illusion. I've used it too many times myself. I'll fix it tomorrow, I'll quit tomorrow, I'll get my life together tomorrow. People don't realize that tomorrow has stolen more dreams than failure ever has. Then came the incident, the one people still whisper about. The older guys got into trouble one night. A fight, a mistake, a moment that spiraled. The kid wasn't directly involved, but he was there. Wrong place, wrong people, wrong timing. The kind of moment adults look at and say, he should have known better. But he didn't. He was just a kid chasing belonging. And because he was there, eyes were now on him for the wrong reasons. Word spread fast. Coaches pulled him aside. Teachers looked at him differently. The reputation he had built with sweat and discipline was suddenly replaced by rumors and disappointment. And that's the thing about reputations, they take years to build and minutes to collapse. One of his coaches tried to talk to him, tried to make him understand that the path he had been walking wasn't lost yet. But the kid didn't want to listen. He felt ashamed, angry, defensive. He pushed everyone away, including the people who actually cared. But the universe isn't cruel just for the sake of it. Sometimes, buried inside the consequences, there's a seed of clarity. The kid just hadn't found his yet. He didn't notice it at first, but something inside him began to shift. Maybe it was the silence that followed the chaos. Maybe it was the heavy way people looked at him now, like he had become a warning instead of a promise. Or maybe it was the absence of the rhythm he once lived by, the bounce of the basketball against concrete, the sound that had always been there, even in the worst days. Now, that sound was gone. The court felt foreign. His own hands felt foreign. And when he looked at himself in the mirror, he didn't see the kid with potential anymore. He saw someone who had thrown it all away. Weeks turned into months. The older guys drifted out of his life, as easily and casually as they had entered. That's something nobody tells you when you're young, how temporary the wrong crowd is. They don't stay to help you pick up the pieces. They don't stand beside you when life demands accountability. They vanish, leaving only echoes behind. And in their absence, he felt the weight of his choices even more. Without their voices drowning out his thoughts, he had nowhere to hide from the truth. His mother watched him quietly. She didn't nag him, didn't yell, didn't lecture. She simply observed the slow unraveling of her son and hoped he would rediscover himself before it was too late. One night, she sat beside him at the kitchen table and asked him a question that caught him completely off guard. "Do you still love the game?" He didn't know how to answer. The truth was yes, he loved it more than anything. But he also felt unworthy of it, like he had betrayed the one thing that ever made him feel alive. He shrugged and said, "I don't know." But she knew. Mothers always know when their children are lying to themselves. A few days later, she left a pair of old, worn basketball shoes on his bed. They had been his father's, the only thing he had left from a man who passed before he could form real memories of him. The shoes were symbolic. Not expensive. Not special. But to the kid, they meant something deeply personal. He stared at them for a long time, fighting the lump in his throat. Maybe it was the reminder of legacy. Maybe it was the reminder of who he used to be. Or maybe it was simply that he realized someone still believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. The next morning, he walked to the old court before sunrise. Nobody was there. The air was cool, the sky still half asleep, and the silence around him felt like forgiveness. He dribbled the ball once, and the sound echoed like a forgotten song. He dribbled again. And again. And with every hit of the ball, something inside him cracked open. The walls he had built around himself began to break. Tears fell, quiet, hot, unplanned. But he didn't stop. He practiced until the sun rose, until his arms burned, until sweat dripped from his chin like rain. And for the first time in months, he felt alive. He started going every morning. Nobody knew. He didn't tell his mother, didn't tell his coaches, didn't tell anyone. It was his private redemption, a secret ritual between him and the dream he thought he had lost. He didn't train for show. He didn't train to impress. He trained because he missed who he was when he was on that court. He trained because he wanted to reclaim something that felt stolen but was, in truth, abandoned by his own hands. Around this time, an old coach who had retired years ago returned to town. He was a stern man, the kind who had built his reputation on discipline and honesty, the kind of coach who didn't sugarcoat reality. He happened to pass by the court one morning and saw the kid practicing alone. He didn't say anything at first. He watched from a distance, concerned by the pain he saw in the kid's movements. Then he walked over, slow and steady, and said, "You look like someone who's trying to outrun regret." The kid froze. Nobody had spoken to him like that before. Nobody had dared to call out the truth so plainly. "I've been watching you," the coach continued. "You still have the fire. But you're letting the past drag you down. That's not how champions are built." The kid didn't know what to say. His voice trembled when he tried to respond. "I messed everything up." The coach nodded. "Yes, you did. But that doesn't mean you're done. The question is, do you want another chance?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes." The coach agreed to train him privately. It wasn't an easy deal. The kid had to show up before sunrise every day, no excuses. He had to run drills until his legs shook, had to shoot until his arms felt like they were made of stone. But he never complained. He had complained about many things in his life, but not this. Because for the first time, he wasn't training for someone else's expectations. He was training for survival. For redemption. For himself. One day, after months of rebuilding, the coach told him about a regional showcase event, a gathering of college scouts looking for overlooked talent. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the NBA. But it was real. It was a door. The kid's heart pounded when he heard it. A door. A second chance. Something he never thought he'd get. But fear came with it, the fear of failing again, of proving to himself that he had lost too much time. The coach saw that fear instantly. "You're scared," he said. "Good. Fear means you care. Go anyway." In the days leading up to the event, the kid practiced like a man possessed. Old doubts clawed at him in the dark hours of the night. What if the scouts saw nothing special in him anymore? What if he had wasted too many years? What if the past had already defined him forever? These thoughts haunted him, but every morning he chose to show up on that court anyway. And that choice, showing up despite the fear, became the quiet revolution inside him. When the day of the showcase finally arrived, he felt like his chest was too small for his beating heart. The gym was filled with players who looked stronger, more polished, more confident. Scouts watched from the bleachers with clipboards and serious eyes. For a moment, he felt small again. Like the kid who threw his dream away. But then he remembered the sunrise practices. The pain. The sweat. The silence. The shoes on his bed. The coach who believed in him. The mother who never gave up. He stepped onto the court. At first, he stumbled. His nerves tangled his movements. He missed shots he normally made with ease. But the coach's voice echoed inside him, "Stop outrunning regret. Start outrunning fear." He closed his eyes for a brief second and inhaled deeply. When he opened them, something clicked. Maybe it was faith. Maybe it was muscle memory. Maybe it was destiny reclaiming its path. He played with a fire that turned heads. His speed, his explosive energy, the raw intensity he brought to every move, it all came back. Scouts leaned forward in their seats. They whispered to each other. They wrote notes. Some even pointed. He felt a spark of hope growing inside him, and that spark turned into a flame that pushed him harder, faster, stronger. By the end of the showcase, the gym was buzzing. Players congratulated him. Coaches nodded with respect. And 3 scouts approached him. Each one offered an opportunity, not a guarantee, not a golden ticket, but a real chance to rebuild what he had thrown away. One school stood out, a disciplined program known for developing overlooked talent into stars. The scout looked him in the eyes and said, "We see potential. But more importantly, we see fight. And that's something you can't teach." He accepted the offer. College wasn't easy. He wasn't the star anymore. Not at first. He had to earn everything, minutes, praise, trust. And he worked for it. Every practice felt like a test. Every game felt like a judgment. But he never quit. And slowly, people began to notice him again. Not for hype. Not for talent alone. But for resilience. For heart. By his second year, he became a starting player. By his third, he was a leader. Reporters wrote articles about the kid who came back from nothing. Teammates described him as the hardest worker they had ever met. Coaches praised not only his skill but his growth as a person. And then, one day, during warm-ups before a big game, someone tapped him on the shoulder. A man in a suit. He turned around and froze. It was the same scout from years ago, the one he had stood up. The one whose opportunity he wasted. The scout smiled, not with judgment, but with quiet pride. "You've come a long way," the scout said. "I always wondered what happened to you. Looks like you found your way after all." The kid swallowed hard, emotion tightening his throat. "I messed up," he admitted softly. "Back then, I wasn't ready. I didn't know who I was." The scout nodded. "Most great players take longer to find themselves. Just glad you did." In that moment, something inside him healed. A wound he had carried for years finally began to close. He didn't make it to the NBA right away. He played overseas first, learned discipline, learned humility, learned leadership. And eventually, after years of climbing, falling, and climbing again, he earned a contract. Not a headline-breaking deal, not a superstar entrance, but a real contract. A real team. A Real jersey. And when he stepped onto that NBA court for the first time, he closed his eyes and heard the echo of a familiar rhythm, his younger self dribbling on cracked concrete, chasing a dream that refused to die. He made it. Not because he was perfect. Not because the path was smooth. But because he chose to rise again after falling harder than most people ever will. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Not that he reached the NBA, but that he learned how to choose better. How to walk away from the wrong people. How to confront his own mistakes. How to believe in himself again. Because life doesn't punish you for falling. It punishes you for refusing to get back up. And he got back up. I think about him sometimes when I'm dealing with my own regrets. It reminds me that no matter how badly we mess up, there's always a door waiting somewhere, maybe smaller, maybe harder to open, but still there. His story isn't about basketball. It's about choices. Yours. Mine. Everyone's. And if you're listening to this right now, maybe there's something in your life you need to choose differently. Maybe this is your moment. Maybe this is your second chance. And if it is, don't let it slip away this time.